Charlie Brown.
All right.
Oh, hello, Patrick.
Hi, Jeremy. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Good. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll take the yeah. We'll take the yeah. We had a fun catch up a few weeks back and a great session just now before we hit the record button. I have the pleasure of knowing who you are, Patrick. But why don't you tell our listeners, our fans, who do I have the pleasure of speaking with right now?
Let's see. My Twitter, I guess it's X now. My Twitter description says, I think it's human being, dad, and marketer in that order. So I guess in the really simplest terms, that's me. But I'm a lover of outdoor sports and adventure. I'm very casual at all that stuff, but I like to run and bike and play golf and just about anything outdoors. I've got two kids. They're both teenagers, which is fantastic and challenging. And it's like a new era of parenting because it's so much different than it used to be. But it's good. And I am a marketer, and I would say I'm more of like a growth oriented marketer. I've always been kind of data driven, outcome driven. I think about frameworks and actions and outcomes and resources. So, but lots of different ways to do that. But I would say probably a growth marketer at heart is what I am.
We'll take that. I love how you started it off with human being, dad, marketer, kind of going from top of the funnel down to the bottom of the funnel as one dad.
Yes.
Yeah, totally. That was great. You reside in the Minneapolis, St. Paul area. You've lived in New York. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about what defines you as a growth marketer and just a little bit more about some of your experiences?
Yeah, well, I started my career on the media side at agencies, and then I moved to Target. I was at Target for many years, starting on e-commerce. I always had an e-commerce role throughout my tenure there, but helped them build some marketing capabilities with their customer data, target audiences, measurement, what we call closed loop reporting, so the ability to connect sort of exposure to a marketing asset and then buying something in store or online, which was really neat because we could understand what's the incremental revenue from these ad campaigns and things like that, which was pretty cool. And then eventually packaged a lot of those capabilities into what is today called Roundel. It's their retail media network. So that was seminal for me. I learned a ton at
Huge.
Target. A lot of great experiences.
You helped create Roundel. That's when we first met about a decade ago through my good friend Phil Numrich. So yeah, you did some great things at Target.
Yep, trying to add video to our network bullseye marketplace is what it was called back then. I don't know if it still is, but Adam Deeriff, I think, still runs it though. So go Adam. And then I went to Etsy, so more e-commerce, and then moved into the startup space where I kind of have been for the past 3 or 4 years. And that kind of complemented my big company experience and my agency experience. So very different, but it enabled me to get closer to the business strategy, be part of a leadership team. I built a marketing function for Codecademy, which was exciting and just so much. I still think back to like all the things that we did during that era. And I'm like, wow, I can't believe we did that in that period of time. It was crazy. But that's how startups are. So very, very different from something like Target or even agency, but additive. So I had a lot of different experiences and learned a lot along the way and was exposed to a lot of different ways of working and philosophies and different businesses and people.
Different businesses and different people, and going from just some giant companies to some small, to some startups. That's a very unique skill set. I can relate from being at some big companies and being at some tiny startups and some other great places in between. It really helps define and nurture who you become. And so, with that said, help us understand a little bit more about your skill set that you're going to be sharing with the OhHello community.
Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned before, I think, growth marketing is probably my core. And so what I typically like to do, and I think it illustrates kind of where my strengths are, is come into a company and assess, what is the current state of their business? What does the customer funnel look like? What are their key metrics, or what should they be? Understanding the data is always a key thing I like to do. So I like to jump into the platforms myself and really understand the data. Really like to understand the customer experience. So if it's an app, I'll download the app, I'll go through everything, I'll sign up for the email, but I become the customer as much as I possibly can to really get deep into the customer and user experience. And then financial, and if you're at an agency, it can be harder because you don't always have access to all the finances. But if you're a consultant or if you're internal, getting access to the financial data is key. So those are kind of the three areas that I always delve deeply into to really understand. And then I complement that with input from stakeholders. So just meeting people, having conversations, understanding what's been done before, what are the pain points, what are the aspirations, and pulling all that together gives a pretty good assessment of kind of where a company's at. And from there, you can translate that into potential opportunities. And so I think about that as a selection set of optionality. Here are the things that we could do. Here's the level of effort. Here's the potential outcome. And then you make selections off of that. What are the things that we're really going to pursue? And then from there, you get into a kind of a road mapping process. And I like to use quarterly OKRs, but it's just a quarterly plan. And then if we're getting really granular, I'm a huge fan of agile. So I like sprints, I like stories, I like effort, single points of accountability. And that's a great way to get things done. And so we then connect, we select our actions, and then we observe the outcomes and we iterate as we go to hopefully get a really great result. So that's what I do.
That is experience right there. So from operational efficiencies to measurement to data to customer experiences to testing and reshifting where the product should be, elevating it to make it work best. That's pretty impressive. What would you tell your younger self, just looking back throughout your career? If you look over your shoulder and you think, what do I tell my two teenagers? What do you tell your younger colleagues that might be a little bit younger than you in terms of what excites you about mentorship and things to look back on?
Well, I think there's maybe a couple different questions there. One is that the advice that I give my teenagers, at least like sort of pseudo professional advice, is, be great at something. If you're great at something, you'll be fulfilled. But I also think really good things happen. My daughter was asking me, do I have to go to college? And I was like, actually, you don't. You should go to college if that's the right path for you. But you got to be good at something. And if you are, there's a lot of other good things that can happen then from that. So I think that advice applies to everyone. Like, be great at something, find your thing and be great at it. That's really, I think, a great way to think about and approach your professional life. In terms of advice I would give myself, that was advice I got because my grandpa had told my dad that, and my dad had told me, and I kind of bought into it. So that was advice I got. So that's not the advice I needed because I got it. The advice that I needed, I think, that I would go back and tell my younger self was treat relationships and people just like you would a business task. And by that I mean prioritize that and say no to things to prioritize that, because time is finite, and so you will have to make choices. We all do. Making time for people is critical, not only to help others but to help yourself. There's something nourishing about community and engaging with other people and helping others that is in some ways kind of selfish in a way, because it's for me. I'm helping you because it makes me feel great, right? But I think that's so important to prioritize it and think about it as something that you have to do. It's not optional, because it's easy to let all the other things be prioritized. And then at the end of the day, realize like I didn't make enough time to go to that conference, to meet with that person, to spend time developing an individual development plan for this person on my team. whatever it might be, like prioritizing those things is really key. And I felt like I definitely didn't understand that earlier in my career. And then even mid-career, I wish I had prioritized it more than I did. So that's the area when I'm really thinking, middle of the night, I don't know about you, but I'm kind of self-critical and I analyze things to that. But that's the area I always go back to, is like, I wish I had prioritized that more than I did.
That said, when we think about your father, your grandfather, who are some mentors? Who are some friendtors? Who are some people that have had a profound impact on your professional career thus far?
My dad was amazing, but he wasn't really a business person. He practiced law, and practicing law and running the business are not the same thing. But if you want to run a law firm, you've got to do both. And so I think he learned a lot in that journey, and I learned a lot in that journey. And there's a million nuances we could talk about there. But one of the things that struck me that I think I learned from him just by observing who he was that he was very principled. He never wavered on his principles, even when it was highly inconvenient to do so. And that I completely respect. I think it's not that common that people will unwaveringly stick true to their principles. And he always did. So I'll always respect him from that. And I learned by sort of observing that and being a part of that. So that was probably the biggest thing. And he was like, Patrick, you should get involved in this technology and data stuff. It's going to define the next generation. I was like, nah, journalism school. So things like that. But that's what kids do. They ignore their parents. Well, for one, Rich Sutton, I worked for at WebMD. He was the chief revenue officer there, and he's been at a bunch of different roles since. But we've always stayed close, ever since I worked for him at WebMD. We get out together and golf once in a while, which is fun. But he's always just, really straightforward. He he won't sugarcoat things. So if you really want like a hard truth, I can run something past him and he'll give me a straightforward answer. And somebody who's altruistic, somebody who's always going to help you no matter what, because they're just a friend. So he's certainly one that comes to mind. Another one is for whatever reason. So Adam kind of built and runs, or did in the past, ran Bullseye Marketplace, which is a media network that we built. Adam built that out, but one of the people on Adam's team was Kyle Plugin Cool, and he just always had a great approach and a balance and everything. Like, I'm somebody that gets really stressed out. I can get really focused, maybe some type A sort of tendencies. And he was always like, big picture, we're going to get through this. Cool as the other side of the pillow. Always knew how to sort of engage with people and not get stressed out about things. So, from a like how to be day to day and just to be like relatable and, for lack of a better term, like be cool. Like, I think of Kyle, like he definitely stood out to me. And I looked at him and was like, man, I got to be more like that, So
that's meaningful. And it's meaningful for you to be able to say that, because mentorship is equally friendtorship. It's people that you work with, that you learn from, they learn from you. It all goes full circle in the sense of altruism of what we talked about earlier. That's great. Thank you for dropping their names. Patrick, as you know, you're going to be able to donate to 40 to 50 different charitable causes within our platform. But if there are others that are near and dear to your heart, what would one be? Something that's meaningful to you?
Alzheimer's Association. That's an easy one. Unfortunately, my dad had Alzheimer's and passed on from Alzheimer's. So that is the right one for me.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Any other, and it's a very important cause, I'm with you on that. Any other parting words of wisdom or advice that you want to give to the OhHello community?
No, I mean, I guess I would say, one of the things that I found is important is just ask. When I don't know something, we all have networks. If your first connection doesn't know something, it's probably a connection of theirs that does. And I feel like for a long time, maybe I was too kind of closed in, afraid to ask, afraid to reach out. Showing that vulnerability, reaching out, asking the question is so important. And I feel like that was a big milestone for me to kind of reach. And so I would offer that up to others too, if they feel that way. go for it. Ask the question. There's somebody who can help you.